Hey y'all, Scott here, and well, I'm stuck here for the foreseeable future. I don't want to slip and fall and have to file a lawsuit against Scott Wozniak, so why not take this opportunity to talk some E3 1997. E3 1997 was held from June 19th to the 21st in 1997 at the Georgia World Congress Center in Atlanta, Georgia. Now that's a wee bit different from the majority of the other E3 events, as most of them are held in California at the LA Convention Center. And great stories generally don't start with "the year was 1997 in Atlanta, Georgia." So many may assume that this year's E3 was much smaller than previous years, and with that I shoot out a simple anti-yikes, this was a solid E3. Every major company brought at least some major stuff. It was a year featuring some of the most iconic and greatest games of all time. And Sega was there too. Even if some games weren't playable at the event, footage was still shown off of them, or they at least had some type of presence. Like with 1996, footage of any sort of press conference is either non-existent or harder than hard to find, so let's take a look at the show floor along with the games each of the big three companies brought. Well, after Sega stumbled through E3 1995 and 96, surely they must have had a great showing this year. We can easily see if they did or not with the aid of everybody's favorite brochure from E3 1997, the Sega E3 1997 brochure. This was given out during the event and includes basically Sega's lineup for the year. Heading into 1997, we decided to ask a lot of people what they would do if they were in charge of Sega. The overwhelming answer: make more great games. So we did. Sonic is more determined than ever to strut his stuff in two new games for Sega Saturn, and joining him is a huge cast of characters, including the iconic characters Quake, Duke Nukem 3D, and Panzer Dragoon. I forgot how much I love the mascot Quake. More games and the power to play them, that's what today's demanding gamers crave. Oh, no way! Blockbuster exclusives like Fighters Megamix and Sonic Jam, eh? A bit weird highlighting Sonic Jam as an exclusive since it's a compilation of the Sonic games on the Genesis, but whatever. In 1997, Sega Saturn continues to turn it up by delivering more games, more innovation, and more power to thrill throughout the year and beyond. Yeah, keep telling yourself that. Turning the page, we see the most infamous Sonic title on the Saturn, Sonic R, a racing game. Dizzying trails to blaze. Sounds about right. And 5 hidden characters to challenge. Beat them, then become them is the sickest possible way to say 5 unlockable characters. We also have some early box art, which looks miles better than the final one. Next is Sonic Jam, a really cool compilation disc featuring Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles. And we can see here Sonic Legend rages onto the ultimate black box. I'd like to ask the writer if they want another crack at that. Fighters Megamix, baby, the best Sega Saturn game. You can fight as a fucking Daytona USA. This brochure definitely shows that the Sega Saturn had a healthy supply of solid exclusives, just not one big one that got everybody excited. Panzer Dragoon Saga, Saturn Bomberman, Die Hard Arcade, a lot of quality stuff here. Just not enough to combat the PlayStation or Nintendo 64. Sports games in 98, come back to me in 10 years and you'll see what sports games can truly be. Sega was really flaunting the Netlink, an accessory for the Saturn that allowed it to access the internet, services ranging from simply browsing the web to checking email to playing games online back in the mid-90s. Now that is impressive. Sega was truly ahead of the time in many cases. We have a section showing off peripherals for the Saturn, and they warned not to play at home without a controller, good thing they told me. We also have the Mission Stick, the only Saturn peripheral worthy of a yeehaw at the end of the description. Sega was still supporting the Genesis back in 97, the Saturn wasn't doing too hot here in North America at all, so Sega had to make sure the Genesis was still in the picture. It's weird that they were advertising a Sonic compilation for the Genesis when their big title for the Saturn that year was a Sonic compilation. Genesis Mega Hit Series delivers classics for a new generation. What? Oh, ho, 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 f that. Game Gear and PC games are next on the docket. Sonic Blast, multiple levels of proven side-scrolling adventure, and that is what's written when you have absolutely nothing to say. Sega really supported their games on the PC back in the day, it's pretty crazy. It's mainly sports and racing games, but there's also titles like Virtua Fighter 2, Enemy Zero, Sonic 3D Blast, and Sonic Schoolhouse. Sega University hires Hedgehog. What the hell are you talking about? You own him! I also have this third-party brochure, which is basically a less detailed, shorter piece showcasing the third-party releases on the Sega Saturn. So Sega's showing was pretty decent. They did show a fair amount of life in the Saturn, and a fair amount of these games are quite good. However, they lacked a big, heavy hitter, and instead supplied a lot of good stuff in the B-tier range. E3 1997 highlighted a major problem with the Nintendo 64, a lack of games compared to the competition. Nintendo only had a few titles on the show floor, the majority of which were titles from Rare. Banjo-Kazooie and GoldenEye 007 were front and center, in addition to Conker's Quest, a kid-friendly 3D platformer that was generally labeled as good. if a bit too similar to Banjo-Kazooie and Super Mario 64. That game later transformed into the adults-only ROM Conker's Bad Fur Day, a move to make the game stand out more. GoldenEye was a huge hit with its 4-player multiplayer, and Banjo-Kazooie was seen as a solid alternative to Super Mario 64. The only Nintendo-made game that was playable on the show floor, however, was Star Fox 64, which was releasing in North America about a week from the event. Alas, the game on everybody's mind was Zelda 64, later known as Ocarina of Time. Not playable at the event, but footage of it was shown alongside F-Zero 64, later titled F-Zero X. And that's about it. Overall, like I said, this E3 really showed off the N64's problem, even though this was a year filled with some of the most memorable games on the platform. GoldenEye, Banjo-Kazooie, Star Fox, and even with Conker, that's one of the biggest cult classics in all of gaming. And yeah, Zelda was a no-show, but it was still there. Kinda. Another no-show was the Nintendo 64 DD, the Japanese-only disk drive add-on for the system. It was stated that they were too busy preparing software for the device and it would launch when it was ready, and man, that is reassuring. Overall, a pretty light year, but still a quality one. E3 1997, the PlayStation was in full force. Not only were big bombastic sequels to previous successes coming out, such as Crash Bandicoot 2, Twisted Metal 2, Tomb Raider 2, and so on, but new faces were in town in the form of Parappa the Rapper, Blasto, and Medieval. Not bad at all. The much anticipated Final Fantasy VII was playable alongside Castlevania Symphony of the Night, but the big announcement of the show was Konami's Metal Gear Solid. While only a trailer was shown, it was a huge announcement and solidified the PlayStation's spot in the industry. The fact that Sony was already pumping out sequels to their games while also being the new home to franchises that were once always associated with Nintendo, this was one of Sony's biggest E3s in terms of quality, quantity, and presence in the industry. Sega showed that a company can be competitive with Nintendo, but Sony proved a company can oust them. Overall, E3 1997 was a huge year for the Expo. While Nintendo and Sega had pretty decent showings, Sony hit it out at the park. Other big announcements included the original Half-Life and Fallout, truly a monumental year. As I said, this was the first year in Atlanta, and many people were pretty peeved about it. It just wasn't that great of a location for E3, being poorly laid out compared to the much more accessible format of the Los Angeles Convention Center of previous years. 1998 would return to Atlanta, but after that, most E3s took place in Los Angeles. Well, that was E3 1997, but I think this event deserves a bit more of a look-see. You see, Sega had a wide variety of sports games available in 1997, but no football. They tackled it with the NFL 2K series a few years later, but why wouldn't they make a football game in 97? A classic case of development hell, that's why. You see, I have this theory that Sega Sports was working on a football game to be released in 97, but it kept on getting delayed and delayed due to the sheer girth of the project until it eventually got cancelled due to the incompetency of the developers in 2006, and then our friendly neighborhood EA picked up the rights to the groundbreaking Sega Football 98, retooled the year to 08, and changed it to EA's own franchise. And now, ladies and gentlemen, may I shock the world and reveal the missing Sega Sports game in 1997 turned out to be... could it have been anything else?